Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're looking at a massive, high-stakes digital heist, a breakthrough that targets the absolute cutting edge of consumer tech. We're calling it the Silicon Siege because it is literally the very first kernel exploit of Apple's highly touted M5 chip. Now, usually, when a tech giant drops new silicon, it's considered the pinnacle of security, right? Like an impenetrable digital fortress. But as we're going to see, even the absolute newest fortresses have their weak spots when they get tested by the right minds.
So, I want you to think about this for a second. How long does it really take to crack Apple's newest silicon? I mean, we are talking about Apple here. They engineer their hardware and software completely in tandem to build an incredibly tight, seemingly impenetrable ecosystem. When they roll out a brand new chip architecture like the M5, they are backing it up with years of security research, millions of dollars in dev costs, and literally the most advanced hardware-level protections out there. It's designed to keep everybody out. If you had to guess the timeline to completely break into the core of a system like that, you'd probably think, what, months, maybe even a year of painstaking reverse engineering?
Try 5 days. Yeah, 5 days. That is the timeline here, and it's exactly why this breakthrough is absolutely sending shockwaves through the tech community right now. We aren't talking about a drawn-out, massive campaign spanning a whole calendar year. We're talking about less than a week to completely compromise the core security of a brand new, state-of-the-art processor. It's wild, and it highlights an incredible sense of urgency and just top-tier skill from the researchers.
Let's move into the first M5 breach and see how this builds. This right here is officially the very first public macOS kernel exploit executed on bare metal M5 hardware. And I really want to emphasize that phrase, bare metal. This means they weren't using an emulator, they weren't hitting a virtual machine or a sim where you can control the variables. No, they attacked the physical M5 silicon hardware itself. This is the real deal. Doing this at the kernel level, the foundational core of the OS that essentially has God mode control over everything on the computer, means they successfully targeted the deepest, most heavily guarded layer of the machine publicly for the very first time.
Moving on to bypassing hardware protections, let's take a look at the actual fortress Apple built.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict of the whole exploit. Apple built these notable hardware-level memory protections directly into the M5 chip, right? The whole point of them is to permanently block malicious code from touching parts of the memory it shouldn't. It's supposed to be the ultimate unbreakable failsafe. But to get past it, the researchers used a kernel memory corruption attack. Basically, they used a software-based method to intentionally confuse the memory management and just slipped right past those physical guards at the gate. It's a classic yet highly sophisticated technique used to completely sidestep advanced structural security.
All right, Section 3, the 5-day exploit. Let's break down this timeline.
So how did they pull it off so fast? Well, it basically all started with obtaining the Mythos preview. That was the crucial foundation that let the researchers rapidly prep and build out their exploit. From that starting point, it took just 5 days to hit a working public macOS kernel exploit. The big takeaway here is that the Mythos preview provided the exact environment they needed to fast-track their research. It let them formulate this wildly complex kernel attack in just a fraction of the time it would usually take.
Let's move into unpacking the attack to reveal the exact technical parameters here.
The absolute key to pulling this whole thing off was achieving a local privilege escalation, or LPE. Gaining that elevated kernel access on an M5 locally is what ultimately handed the researchers the keys to the kingdom. Now, obviously, we all know how critical an LPE is in any exploit chain, but executing it flawlessly on this specific, highly guarded chip architecture, that is exactly what elevates this from a neat piece of theoretical research into a profound, practical compromise of Apple's flagship hardware.
And you've got to look at the exact data behind the hit, because it's fascinating. Big shout out to the crew from Calif who pulled this off, researchers Bruce Stang, Dion Blazakis, and Josh Maine. Their precise target? macOS 26.4.1, specifically build 25E253, running directly on bare metal M5 hardware. This level of exact specificity is why understanding this breach is so critical. We aren't talking in hypotheticals anymore. This was a targeted, successfully executed mission against a very specific modern Apple environment.
Which brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? What does this mean for the future of Apple's silicon security now that the M5 has been publicly exploited? I mean, this is the eternal cybersecurity cat-and-mouse game in action. Apple builds this state-of-the-art hardware wall, and brilliant researchers figure out how to scale it in literally 5 days. So, is the chip fundamentally flawed, or is this just the kind of intense friction required to force tech giants to constantly evolve and improve their protections? Keep that in mind as this landscape continues to shift. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.